monarchs are people just like us. Well, maybe not just like us, they have more money. But one thing that plagues all monarchs from Louis XIV to Queen Elizabeth II is the problem of staying in power. And the longer you reign, the more difficult it becomes. And history shows that there's only 3 ways that a monarchy can die. And today, we're going to tell you about them. Monarchy vs. Merchants. The year is 1250, and you are the monarch of England. Life is pretty good. You live in a castle. You get to hunt sometimes. The peasants work hard so that you can enjoy the fruits of your land. Everything seems hunky-dory until one day when your royal tax collectors come to collect taxes from the town and the local guild leader says no. Now this shouldn't happen because theoretically your power is absolute. And yet somehow the little guy is standing up to you. Why? Because since the High Middle Ages, the balance of power in medieval society has been shifting. While kings and queens were still the ultimate authority in their realms, they had to be careful not to step on the toes of the growing merchant class. See, during the High Middle Ages, towns had become increasingly important for trade, production, and political organization. In fact, many powerful monarchs built their residences in or near towns. In part, this was because towns had become the centers of economic activity, with merchant guilds wielding significant wealth and influence. These guilds, which represented various crafts and industries, worked together to ensure favorable trading conditions and protect the interests of their members. For example, they could set prices for goods and services and regulate the quality of products to ensure they met certain standards. And they also controlled the entry of new people into their respective trades, limiting the number of apprenticeships and journeyman positions to prevent overcompetition. As a result, the members of these guilds became quite wealthy and influential in the towns they lived in. So much so that many monarchs were forced to recognize their importance and grant them certain privileges in exchange for their support. For example, many monarchs granted the right to elect some of their own officials, which allowed them to have a say in how they were governed. This arrangement, however, could lead to conflicts between the crown and the guilds, especially when the monarchs attempted to impose taxes or regulations that were unpopular with the merchants. For example, in 1265, King Henry III of England tried to impose a new tax on the English wool industry, which led to a revolt by the wool merchants. The revolt ended with the merchants paying the tax, but it demonstrated the growing power of the merchant class. As a result, monarchs had to walk a fine line between maintaining their authority and respecting the rights and interests of the merchants. The long 13th century. The year is 1290, and you are the King of England. Life isn't bad. You've got a nice castle. The peasants are mostly kept under control. And while those pesky barons gave you a hard time a couple of centuries ago, things have quieted down now, right? Wrong. There's a buzz in the air that you can't quite put your finger on. People are talking about freedom and rights, and they want a say in how they're governed. What gives? Well, it turns out that the ideas of freedom and rights were circulating throughout Europe in the late Middle Ages, thanks to thinkers like John Locke and the Magna Carta. But that doesn't mean everyone understood or agreed with these ideas. However, this didn't stop people from talking about them. In fact, rumors spread like wildfire in the taverns and marketplaces, and soon everyone was buzzing about their rights and freedoms. Of course, this was a problem for monarchs who relied on the obedience of their subjects. When people started talking about overthrowing the government and replacing it with something else, well, that was a problem. Take, for example, the English Peasants' Revolt of 1381. While it wasn't directly caused by discussions about freedom and rights, these ideas certainly played a role in inspiring the rebels. Similarly, the Jacquerie in France and the Chompy Revolt in Italy showed that people were ready to fight for better treatment and a greater voice in government. Now, these revolts were eventually crushed, but the message was received. Monarchs couldn't just ignore the growing desire for political participation and representation. Representative government. The year is 1450, and you are the monarch of England. Things are pretty good. You don't have to worry about those crazy peasants anymore. But there's a group of people who do want to talk to you, and they claim to represent the people. Oh great. Representative government was a system in which elected officials represented the interests of their constituents in decision-making processes, thereby giving voice to the people and mitigating arbitrary rule. And while it might sound like a good idea, you're not too sure. Is this really the best idea? Will you even stay in power? We'll tell you right after. Okay, here's the deal. Representative government involves electing individuals to make decisions on behalf of the people. These representatives, typically called members of parliament, were chosen through various methods, such as inheritance or election within local communities. From there, they came together in a legislative body to discuss and make laws in the best interest of the realm. While this might seem like a good way to keep the peace, you're not so sure. Will this group of people represent what you want? The answer, probably not. That's because representative government shifted the balance of power away from the monarch and toward the people. By giving the people a voice in government through elected representatives, this system allowed for more inclusive decision-making and reduced the likelihood of arbitrary or tyrannical rule. But this change wasn't without its challenges. Conflicts between the crown and the representatives were common as monarchs struggled to maintain their authority in the face of growing popular participation in politics. For example, in England, the struggle between the Crown and Parliament over taxation and other matters led to the English Civil War in the 17th century. Ultimately, though, representative government proved to be a powerful force for change, leading to the establishment of constitutional monarchies and democratic institutions across Europe and beyond. Bureaucratic absolutism. The year is 1650, and you are the monarch of France. Things aren't too bad. France is a big place, and it's your job to run it. But with all this land to cover and people to govern, it's getting hard to keep track of everything. So how do you solve this problem and stay in power at the same time? You hire some people. Bureaucratic absolutism was an innovative approach to governance that emerged in early modern Europe as a way to centralize power and authority in the hands of the monarchy. This system involved the creation of a professional bureaucracy staffed by appointed officials rather than hereditary nobles, which allowed the monarch to exert greater control over the administration of their realm. But wait a minute, you still have those pesky feudal lords. Yes, and they're going to be a problem if you try to implement bureaucratic absolutism. That's because bureaucratic absolutism threatened the traditional power and privileges of the nobility. By reducing the influence of the feudal lords and replacing it with a centralized bureaucracy, monarchs could potentially diminish the power of the nobility and limit their ability to challenge royal authority. This conflict between the crown and the nobility was a key factor in the development of bureaucratic absolutism. In France, for example, King Louis XIV's efforts to strengthen royal authority and weaken the nobility resulted in the revocation of the Edict of Nantes and the persecution of French Protestants. Despite these challenges, bureaucratic absolutism ultimately triumphed, leading to the rise of powerful centralized states in France, Prussia, and Russia. However, by the 17th and 18th centuries, the limitations of this system became apparent. The rigidity and inefficiency of the bureaucracy, coupled with the growing influence of Enlightenment ideas, contributed to the decline of absolutist monarchies and paved the way for new forms of government. There are lots of ways that monarchies have died, from revolution to constitutional crisis, but the story doesn't end here. The 18th century saw the rise of new forms of government and power, shaping the world we live in today. And if you want to learn more about that, well, you're in luck, because we've got just the thing for you. Check out the series in the description below to see how monarchies evolved during the 18th century. Thanks for watching.